So let's start with a story. It's a teaching story of, it's usually used for heaven and hell, the difference between heaven and hell, but I want to use it as an example of wholeness. So there were two groups of people they were hungry, and they were given this huge pot of stew. It was like the bottom of this hole, and so everyone was given this very long spoon to eat, and the spoons were so long there was no way you could feed yourself. And so there was one group of people were getting all angry and everything and trying to steal the, as people were trying to bring it up and feed themselves, and they couldn't get the spoon to their mouth, they were grabbing each other's spoons. And then the other group, what they realized is they couldn't feed themselves, but they could feed the person across from them, because they were all circled around this pot. They could feed the person across from them with their long spoons. And so what they did is they took turns to feed each other the stew. And in doing that, everyone got fed. Everyone got fed. The stew wasn't splattered all over the place, and everyone was nourished. And that, we'll come back to that, because that's wholeness. That's wholeness versus chaos, versus not wholeness. One of the things I really love about this reading from this thing called You, which is also one of my favorite books to read over and over again, is that it reminds us that wholeness is not sameness. It doesn't erase our uniqueness. It invites us instead to recognize our uniqueness, and that uniqueness belongs to the whole. And along with that story of the long spoons, you can also think of it as tapestry. I don't know if you've ever been either in a museum or someone's home, or I was really impressed when I was in England one time, and we went to a couple of castles, and there were these huge tapestries on the walls that actually helped to keep the castle warm in the winter and cooler in the summer. But they were beautiful. They were so intricate. And when I think of wholeness, beyond my own wholeness, but the wholeness of humanity, what I think of is this beautiful tapestry that is so intricate that you need to have every thread that's in there to have the whole story. And so humanity, our wholeness, our uniqueness belongs to the whole, belongs to the universe. And humanity itself is a beautiful collection of countless unique individuals. And what society is the composite of all of that uniqueness coming together, expressing divinity in its wholeness. And so in this reading, there's two truths that we can remember from it. One is that we are each individuals. We are each unique, individualized expressions of the divine. And that the second one is that each of us belongs to this larger life, the one life, that tapestry that we call life. And it's important that each of us is there. Now, as we move, we've been talking about wholeness, whole no matter what, all month, different aspects. And we'll continue it today. And next week, Reverend Jason will give us another aspect of it. But there's two questions that we can ask ourselves today. One is, do I believe I'm whole? Do I really believe that I am whole? Just think about that for a few seconds. Something to contemplate this week. And the other one is, can I recognize wholeness in everyone? And I emphasize everyone. Can I recognize wholeness in people that are different from me? look different, sound different, dress different, people I don't understand, people whose stories I don't even know, or people who have a different worldview than mine that I may find challenging. Can I see wholeness in everyone? Do I believe I'm whole? Can I see wholeness in everyone? Because the truth is that as an individual, we are a spiritual being. We're having a spiritual experience and we're in human form. And our human form is how we display our uniqueness. We are each unique expressions of the divine in every one of us. Whether you look like me, whether you sound like me, whether you have the same worldview as I have, whether you worship the way I worship or not. Each and every one of us, you, I'm talking to you, as I would say to my grandkids. You are a unique, individualized expression of the divine. That's not just some trite saying. That is truth. And each of us is an outlet through which creative intelligence seeks to express itself and fulfill itself, to see the life that it creates as only you can see it, as only you can express. And one of the visuals I have is that if I think of the creative intelligence, God, spirit, whatever we want to call that power and presence, if I think of it as this beautiful jewel that has a light within it, and each of us is that facet, and the light can come through only as we can have it come through. And the more we get all of this stuff that has domesticated us, as Don Miguel Ruiz talks about in the Four Agreements, the clearer, the cleaner, the more polished our little facet of life, and it's actually a big facet, the better that light shines through. And what does that mean? What that means is that none of us, there's not one of us who hears my voice or who doesn't hear my voice. If they exist right now, it means I don't have to become worthy to be whole. I don't have to earn wholeness. I am whole just as I am right now. And I am that because I am here. I breathe. And so I invite each and every one of you to just take a conscious breath in right now. So when we take that conscious breath in, we are breathing in life. Capital L, life. We are breathing in spirit. And the way I envision it is every molecule of oxygen that I bring into my body and goes into my lungs also brings with it the fire of spirit. And it just feeds my body. It feeds each and every one of us. So if wholeness is true for me, and wholeness is true for you, then wholeness is true for all. And what I want to talk about today is wholeness is more than a comforting personal idea. It's very comforting once I can get whatever level I can understand it, that I am whole as I am right now. Does that mean there's work to do? Oh yeah, there's work to do. On my spiritual path, there's work to do. I'm still whole right now as I am. Very comforting. But what it means is that wholeness is something beyond that comfort. The wholeness in the largest expression of itself is actually a collective spiritual responsibility that we have. Because we cannot claim our own wholeness and deny it to someone else. Because I know those of you from Connecticut who heard me when I was up there, I'll ask how many are here right now? How many are on if we went into gallery mode? How many? One. There's one, and that oneness is expressing as this beautiful tapestry of unique expressions of that life. And so here's a test that I use myself, and I invite you to use it too. Can I see wholeness in those that I love? I'd say 99.999% of the time, yes. And the next question is, can I see wholeness in people that we have been taught to call other? Can we see wholeness in people we have been taught, consciously or unconsciously, to call other? Because what I know is, again, when we deny someone else's wholeness, we're denying God, or whatever you want to call that power and presence that is the creator, sustainer, and animator of all that exists. We deny the presence of God in another person if we deny them their wholeness. And this may not be easy to hear, but it's really important for us to know. It's important for us to hear. Because what happens is this otherness, if you will, this exclusion doesn't just announce itself loudly from the start. It begins very quietly. Because what it does is it lives in assumptions that we have inherited, that we have consciously or unconsciously brought into, as in the four agreements, it's called the agreements that we have made in our domestication. It lives in the judgments that we have absorbed. It lives in the cultural messages that we've just never stopped to question. And we are taught, either directly or indirectly, by the society that we live in, by the family unit. That's, it can go out as far as you want, from me to the family to the society to the world. We are taught who is valuable and who is not, who is safe and who is not, who's normal, and what does that mean? Who's acceptable? Who deserves my compassion? Who deserves suspicion? And if we never examine these hidden beliefs that we have, these hidden agreements that we have in that human form that we all are in, then what happens is all of that quietly shapes the size of those we allow into our own circle and excludes others. And so the invitation here is not to be in shame, not to, I'm a bad person or anything, because we're whole right now as we are. Is there more that we can grow? Absolutely, because when we, instead of just accepting these hidden beliefs that we may have never questioned, our invitation is to look at them with curiosity and to ask ourselves, as we explore these hidden beliefs, who have I been taught to fear? Who have I been taught to dismiss? Whose suffering have I been trained not to notice? And where do I draw a boundary and defend it as if it were spiritual truth? There's a great metaphysician, Ken Wilber, who's written many, many books. Spiral dynamics is what he is most widely known for. But in his books, No Boundary, he says, since every boundary line is also a battle line, Here is the human predicament. The firmer one's boundaries, the more entrenched are one's battle. Firmer one's boundaries, the more entrenched are one's battle. Just sit with that for a moment. Boundaries. Who's safe? Who's acceptable? Because sometimes we set up boundaries to protect ourselves. But the firmer those boundaries are, the more that they will keep us from experiencing this larger wholeness. And so we can look at those. What is it that caused those boundaries? Why do I have those boundaries? I'm not saying to take them all down. It's just be aware of what they are, of where it comes from, of is this a learned behavior? Because as long as I have those boundaries, I will have a potential battle line. It's an example that comes to me is I had a boss one time who I never left his office without the two of us getting into a screaming match. This was long before I started on my conscious spiritual path. He and I just didn't get along at all. I was doing work. I was working with from a spiritual guru at the time. I didn't realize that was not what I was doing. And what happened was I was told to start asking these questions in and of myself. What is it about him? I wanted him to change because he was the jerk. I wanted him. But what I needed to do was to take a look inside of me and what was triggering me. I had a boundary there. And what I found was he had the same facial gesture on his face whenever my father was going to add, "You've done a great job, but here's all the things you did wrong." And I wasn't going to take it anymore. I set a boundary. Nobody was going to do that to me ever again. And so he and I fought. It's like, oh, Jackie's going in his office. Let's hang around and see what happens this time. What are they going to argue about this time? And once I realized that I had that boundary and it was hard and firm and there was no way I was ever going to drop it, and I started to soften that boundary, we started to get along. We started to be able to do the engineering projects that we were doing together without arguing. And that's how some boundaries can show up. It could just be something as simple as that. Or it could be this whole concept of othering. And what othering means is that's when we turn people into them. And we do it in a sense of them versus us, or you versus me. And there's a difference there. And it may seem like they're less worthy or less human, or they're just less connected to us. There's something that's other about them. It's because once we other somebody or a group of people, it becomes easier not to care, to not listen, to not grieve with them, and not recognize that their life is actually bound up with ours. There's a saying that they can rent a lot of space in your head when you other people. And in this theme this month of whole no matter what, wholeness is true not only when someone's familiar with us, or we're familiar with them, or we agree with them, or they worship like us, they vote like us, they see the world the same way we do, they live like us, they express themselves in the same way I do. They look like me, they talk like me, they dress like me. Wholeness is, again, bigger than that comfort. Because in this world, in this world of unique, individualized expressions of the divine, diversity is a fact and belonging is a practice. And when we start creating belonging without othering, it becomes a spiritual practice. As Thich Nhat Hanh says, we are here to awaken from the illusion of our separateness. So let me talk about belonging for a little bit, just real quick, because it's more than just inclusion. It's not just bringing someone in the room who is out of the room, who we left out of the room, and let them come in and just let them sit there. What it is it's recognizing, honoring, and celebrating the differences that we have and affirming that all are a part of this larger whole. What it says is you don't have to become like me to be worthy of my love and respect. And one way to cultivate this is what's called bridging, where we come together across these differences. We affirm these different identities rather than trying to erase them or ignore them, pretend that they're not even there. We reject that us versus them. And what that practice takes is listening with curiosity. It takes staying courageous, especially when the conversations become uncomfortable, and honoring the humanity of all of the people who are there, whether their ways or views or whatever are radically different from ourselves. And that's what Reverend Jason is wanting us to be when we come to his workshop over the next few weeks. Desmond Tutu says we are different precisely in order to realize our need for one another. And in this vastness, in this incredible tapestry, difference is not failure of wholeness. It is the way we learn that we really need each other. We are really one. We're all one. And bridging, when we do this, bridging becomes an actual spiritual practice. So that question comes up. So what can I do? That's really great, Jackie, but what can I do? Well, what I ask all of us, myself included, this week is to pay attention. Pay attention to any othering language that we experience. Pay attention to it in the press, in the social media, in our conversations that we have, in our own thoughts. And when we start looking at it in our own thoughts, do it gently and honestly. And some questions we can start asking is, where does this language come from? And how is it affecting the situation? And what step can I take to begin bridging when someone I'm with I perceive as different? So our affirmation this week is, I recognize and honor that I am part of one global family. And that's a really beautiful affirmation, but when we start seeing it as a way of seeing, of speaking, of listening, of the choices we make, it actually becomes a spiritual practice. So if humanity is divinity waking up to itself, then every act of belonging that we do helps the whole world awaken to its spiritual magnificence. So let's recognize the divine in ourselves and in one another, knowing that we're whole no matter what. And so as I close this message today, this lesson, this talk, I leave you with a quote from the founder of the Baha'i faith, Baha'u'llah. The utterance of God is a lamp, whose light is these words: Ye are the fruits of one tree, and the leaves of one branch. Deal ye one with another with the utmost love and harmony, with friendliness and fellowship. And he goes on to say, so powerful is the light of unity that it can illuminate the whole earth. So be that light this week. Be that light. Start this week. You already are that light. Let it shine. Just let it shine. And so that is the message for today.